The following is a presentation of the Howard County Poetry and Literature Society.
Notre grand patron de théâtre français, Molière. Molière, comme Shakespeare, est l'éternel représentant du comédien.
Molière is to the French what Shakespeare is to the English, their great man of the theater. At his peak, the 17th century actor and playwright was under the patronage of Louis XIV. Molière's company performed at Versailles, and in Paris was the forerunner of today's French National Theatre, the Comédie Française. To confer with his patron, Molière was sometimes asked to breakfast with the Sun King and his courtiers in the royal bedchamber. Molière's great comedies of character spring to life in modern conversational rhymed English thanks to Richard Wilbur. Tartuffe, The Misanthrope, and School for Wives, translated with fidelity and charm, are a continuous delight from beginning to end. During his year as Poet Laureate, Mr. Wilbur hosted a program of staged readings from his Molière at Smith Theater, Columbia, Maryland. Leading the cast was Brian Bedford, who created the role of Arnulf in School for Wives on Broadway, winning a Tony Award. After the readings, Mr. Wilbur will join Mr. Bedford downstage for a discussion with the audience. And now, Richard Wilbur.
Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Bedford and Helen Carey and Michelle Farr are going to give us three chunks from three of Molière's comedies, starting with Tartuffe. The central figure in Molière's Tartuffe is a rich bourgeois named Orgon, who is suffering from what we now call a midlife crisis. Feeling youth and vitality slipping away from him, he's compensated by becoming a religious bigot and making life miserable for his household, which consists of his charming young wife Elmire and his two children by a previous marriage, Marianne and Damis. On one of his frequent visits to church, Orgon has met a confidence man named Tartuffe, who has taken him in by a pretense of holy poverty. And Orgon has brought him home, establishing him in the house as an honored guest, spiritual guide, and moral censor. Orgon's family all see clearly that Tartuffe is a phony, and they find his presence oppressive and intolerable. But Orgon is infatuated by his guest and supports and pampers him in every way. In Act 2, Orgon has gone so far in his infatuation as to decide that his daughter Marianne's engagement to the man she loves must be cancelled and that she must marry Tartuffe instead. Orgon's horrified family hold a conference in which it's decided that Elmire, Orgon's young wife, must have a conversation with Tartuffe and persuade him not to accept the offer of Marianne's hand. As Act 3, Scene 2 begins, Tartuffe is leaving his second-floor room, speaking over his shoulder to his manservant Laurent. As he descends the staircase, the family maid Dorine is waiting to tell him that her mistress would like a word with him.
Hang up my hair shirt, put my scourge in place, and pray, Laurent, for heaven's perpetual grace. I'm going to the prison now to share my last few coins with the poor wretches there.
Dear God, what affectation, what a fake.
You wish to see me?
Yes.
For mercy's sake, please take this handkerchief before you speak.
What?
Cover that bosom, girl. The flesh is weak, and unclean thoughts are difficult to control. Such sights as that can undermine the soul.
Your soul, it seems, has very poor defenses. And flesh makes quite an impact on your senses. It's strange that you're so easily excited. My own desires are not so soon ignited. And if I saw you naked as a beast, not all your hide would tempt me in the least.
Girl, speak more modestly. Unless you do, I shall be forced to take my leave of you.
Oh, no. It's I who must be on my way. I've just one little message to convey. Madame is coming down and begs you, sir, to wait and have a word or two with her.
Gladly.
That had a softening effect. I think my guess about him was correct.
Will she be long?
No. That's her step, I hear. Ah, here she is. And I shall disappear.
May heaven, whose infinite goodness we adore, preserve your body and soul forevermore, and bless your days, and answer thus the plea of one who is its humblest votary.
I thank you for that pious wish, but please do take a chair and let's be more at ease.
I trust that you are once more well and strong.
Oh, yes. The fever didn't last for long.
My prayers are too unworthy, I am sure, to have gained from heaven this most gracious cure. But lately, madam, my every supplication has had for object your recuperation.
You shouldn't have troubled so. I don't deserve it.
Your health is priceless, madam. And to preserve it, I'd gladly give my own, in all sincerity.
Sir, you outdo us all in Christian charity. You've been most kind. I count myself your debtor.
'Twas nothing, madam. I long to serve you better.
There's a private matter I'm anxious to discuss. I'm glad there's no one here to hinder us.
I too am glad. It floods my heart with bliss to find myself alone with you like this. For just this chance I've prayed with all my power, but prayed in vain until this happy hour.
This won't take long. Sir, I hope you'll be entirely frank and unconstrained with me.
Indeed, there's nothing I'd rather do than bare my inmost heart and soul to you. First, let me say that what remarks I've made about the constant visits you are paid were prompted not by any mean emotion, but rather by a pure and deep devotion, a fervent zeal.
No need for explanation. Your sole concern, I'm sure, was my salvation.
Quite so, and such great fervour do I feel.
Oh, please, you're pinching.
It was from excess of zeal. I never meant to cause you pain, I swear. I'd rather...
What can your hand be doing there?
Feeling your gown. What soft, fine woven stuff.
Please, I'm extremely ticklish. That's enough.
My, what lovely lacework on your dress. The workmanship's miraculous, no less. I've not seen anything to equal it.
Yes, quite, but let's talk business for a bit. They say my husband means to break his word and give his daughter to you, sir. Had you heard?
He did once mention it, but I confess I dream of quite a different happiness. It's elsewhere, madam, that my eyes discern the promise of that bliss for which I yearn.
I see. You care for nothing here below.
Ah, well, my heart's not made of stone, you know.
All your desires mount heavenward, I'm sure, in scorn of all that's earthly and impure.
A love of heavenly beauty does not preclude a proper love of earthly pulchritude. Our senses are quite rightly captivated by perfect works our Master has created. Some glory clings to all that heaven has made. In you, all heaven's marvels are displayed. On that fair face, such beauties have been lavished, the eyes are dazzled and the heart is ravished. How could I look on you, O flawless creature, and not adore the author of all nature, feeling a love both passionate and pure for you, his triumph of self-portraiture? At first I trembled, lest that love should be a subtle snare that hell had laid for me. I vowed to flee the sight of you, eschewing a rapture that might prove my soul's undoing. But soon, fair being, I became aware that my deep passion could be made to square with rectitude and with my bounden duty. I thereupon surrendered to your beauty. It is, I know, presumptuous on my part to bring you this poor offering of my heart, and it is not my merit, heaven knows, but your compassion on which my hopes repose. You are my peace, my solace, my salvation. On you depends my bliss or desolation. I abide your judgment, and as you think best, I shall be either miserable or blessed.
Your declaration is most gallant, sir, but don't you think it's out of character? You'd have done better to restrain your passion and think before you spoke in such a fashion. It ill becomes a pious man like you.
I may be pious, but I'm human too. With your celestial charms before his eyes, a man has not the power to be wise. I know such words sound strangely coming from me, but I'm no angel, nor was meant to be. And if you blame my passion, you must needs reproach as well the charms on which it feeds. Your loveliness I had no sooner seen than you became my soul's unrivaled queen. Before your seraph glance, divinely sweet, my heart's defenses crumbled in defeat, and nothing fasting, prayer, or tears might do could stay my spirit from adoring you. My eyes, my sighs have told you in the past what now my lips make bold to say at last. And if in your great goodness you will deign to look upon your slave and ease his pain, if in compassion for my soul's distress you'll stoop to comfort my unworthiness, I'll raise to you in thanks for that sweet manner an endless hymn, an infinite hosanna. With me, of course, there need be no anxiety, no fear of scandal or notoriety. These young court gallants whom all the ladies fancy are vain in speech, in action rash and chancy. When they succeed in love, the world soon knows it. No favours granted them, but they disclose it, and by the looseness of their tongues profane the very altar where their hearts have lain. Men of my sort, however, love discreetly. And one may trust our reticence completely. My keen concern for my good name ensures the absolute security of yours. In short, I offer you, my dear Elmire, love without scandal, pleasure without fear.
I've heard your well-turned speeches to the end, and what you urge I clearly apprehend. Aren't you afraid that I may take a notion to tell my husband of your warm devotion, and that supposing he were duly told, his feeling toward you might grow rather cold?
I know, dear lady, that your exceeding charity will lead your heart to pardon my temerity, that you'll excuse my violent affection as human weakness, human imperfection, and that, O fairest, you will bear in mind that I'm but flesh and blood, and I'm not blind.
Some women might do otherwise, perhaps, but I shall be discreet about your lapse. I'll tell my husband nothing of what's occurred if, in return, you'll give your solemn word to advocate as forcefully as you can the marriage of Valère and Marianne.
Elmire, by the end of that scene, has almost gotten Tartuffe under her thumb and so solved the family's problem. Unfortunately, her stepson Damis now bursts out of a closet where he's been hiding and cries, "No, we'll not hush up this vile affair." The plot immediately grows messy once again, and it takes 2 more acts for Tartuffe to get what's coming to him. Now for the misanthrope. In Act 3, Scene 5 of the Misanthrope, we have the famous encounter between Célimène and Arsinoé. Célimène is a beautiful and flirtatious young widow of 20 who, insofar as she knows her own mind, prefers the play's hero Alceste to all her other suitors. Arsinoe, who pretends to be a prude but secretly hankers for Alceste, is a little older than Célimène, enough older so that she can be made to feel it. As Arsinoe enters Célimène's salon, two of her hostess's suitors exit, laughing.
It's just as well those gentlemen didn't tarry.
Shall we sit down?
That won't be necessary, madam. The flame of friendship ought to burn brightest in matters of the most concern, and as there's nothing which concerns us more than honor, I have hastened to your door to bring you, as your friend, some information about the status of your reputation. I visited last night some virtuous folk, and quite by chance, it was of you they spoke. There was, I fear, no tendency to praise your light behavior and your dashing ways. The quantity of gentlemen, you see, and your by now notorious coquetry were both so vehemently criticized by everyone that I was most surprised. Of course, I needn't tell you where I stood. I came to your defense as best I could. Assured them you were harmless and declared your soul was absolutely unimpaired. But there are some things you must realize one can't excuse, however hard one tries. And I was forced at last into conceding that your behavior, madam, is misleading, that it makes a bad impression, gives rise to ugly gossip and obscene surmise, and that if you were more overtly good, you wouldn't be so much misunderstood. Not that I think you've been unchaste. No. The saints preserve me from a thought so low. But mere good conscience never did suffice. One must avoid the outward show of vice. Madam, you're too intelligent, I'm sure, to think my motives anything but pure in offering you this counsel, which I do out of a zealous interest in you.
Madam, I haven't taken you amiss. I'm very much obliged to you for this. And I'll at once discharge the obligation by telling you about your reputation. You've been so friendly as to let me know what certain people say of me. And so I mean to follow your benign example by offering you a somewhat similar sample. The other day I went to an affair and found some most distinguished people there discussing piety, both false and true. The conversation soon came round to you. Alas, your prudery and your bustling zeal appeared to have a very slight appeal. Your affectation of a grave demeanor, your endless talk of virtue and of honor, the aptitude of your suspicious mind for finding sin where there is none to find, your towering self-esteem, that pitying face with which you contemplate the human race, your sermonizings, and your sharp aspersions on people's pure and innocent diversions, all these were mentioned, madam, and in fact were roundly and concertedly attacked. What good, they said, or all her outward shows, when everything belies her pious pose. She prays incessantly, but then they say she beats her maids and cheats them of their pay. She shows her zeal in every holy place, but still she's vain enough to paint her face. She holds that naked statues are immoral, but with a naked man should have no quarrel. Of course, I said to everybody there that they were being viciously unfair. But still, they did dispose to criticize you, and all agreed that someone should advise you to leave the morals of the world alone and worry rather more about your own. They felt felt that one's self-knowledge should be great before one thinks of setting others straight, that one should learn the art of living well before one threatens other men with hell, and that the church is best equipped, no doubt, to guide our souls and root our vices out. Madam, you're too intelligent, I'm sure, to think my motives anything but pure in offering you this counsel, which I do out of a zealous interest in you.
I dared not hope for gratitude, but I did not expect so acid a reply. I judge, since you've been so extremely tart, that my good counsel pierced you to the heart.
Far from it, madam. Indeed, it seems to me we ought to trade advice more frequently. One's vision of oneself is so defective that it would be an excellent corrective. If you are willing, madam, let's arrange shortly to have another frank exchange, in which we'll tell each other, entre nous, what you've heard tell of me and I of you.
Oh, people never censure you, my dear. It's me they criticize, or so I hear.
Madam, I think we either blame or praise according to our taste and length of days. There is a time of life for coquetry. There is a season, too, for prudery when all one's charms are gone. It is, I'm sure, good strategy to be devout and pure. It makes one seem a little less forsaken. Someday, perhaps, I'll take the road you've taken. Time brings all things. But I have time aplenty, and see no cause to be a prude at 20.
You give your age in such a gloating tone that one would think I was an ancient crone. We're not so far apart in sober truth that you can mock me with a boast of youth. Madam, you baffle me. I wish I knew what moves you to provoke me as you do.
For my part, madam, I should like to know why you abuse me everywhere you go. Is it my fault, dear lady, that your hand is not, alas, in very great demand? If men admire me, if they pay me court, and daily make me offers of the sort you dearly love to have them make to you, how can I help it? What will you have me do? If what you want is lovers, please, feel free to take as many as you can from me.
Oh, come. Do you think the world is losing sleep over that flock of lovers which you keep, or that we find it difficult to guess what price you pay for their devotedness? Surely you don't expect us to suppose mere merit could attract so many beaux. It's not your virtue that they're dazzled by, nor is it virtuous love for which they sigh. You're fooling no one, madam. The world's not blind. There's many a lady heaven has designed to call men's noblest, tenderest feelings out, who has no lovers dogging her about, from which it's plain that lovers nowadays must be acquired in bold and shameless ways, and modesty and virtue, and only pay one court for such reward as modesty and virtue can't afford. Then don't be quite so puffed up, if you please, about your tawdry little victories. Try, if you can, to be a shade less vain, and treat the world with somewhat less disdain. If one were envious of your amours, one soon could have a following like yours. Lovers are no great trouble to collect, if one prefers them to one's self-respect.
Collect them then, my dear. I'd love to see you demonstrate that charming theory. Who knows, you might...
No, madam, that will do. It's time to end this trying interview. My coach is late in coming to your door, or I'd have taken leave of you before.
Oh, please, don't feel that you must rush away. I'd be delighted, madam, if you'd stay. However, lest my conversation bore you, let me provide some better company for you. This gentleman who comes most apropos will please you more than I can do. I know.
Now for the School for Wives. Arnulf, the central character in Molière's School for Wives, is a middle-aged man whose deep general insecurity has somehow been focused into a specific dread of being cuckolded. It's his theory, based on much anxious observation, that a stupid wife is not likely to shame her husband by being unfaithful. Arnulf has put his theory into action by adopting a 4-year-old girl, a girl child named Agnès, and by having her trained in a convent to be docile and ignorant. She's now 17 years old, and Arnulf plans to marry her very soon. As the play begins, he returns home from a journey and is horrified to learn from various sources that his sequestered ward has somehow been seeing a young man. In Act 2, Scene 5, Arnulf has bidden Agnès to come with him for a morning stroll, during which he means to learn the truth of the matter.
The weather's mild.
Oh, yes.
Most pleasant.
Indeed.
What news, my child?
The kitten died.
Too bad. But what of that? All men are mortal, my dear, and so's a cat. While I was gone, no doubt, it rained and poured.
No,
You were bored, perhaps?
I'm never bored.
During my 10 days' absence, what did you do?
6 nightshirts, I believe. 6 nightcaps, too.
My dear Agnès, this world's a curious thing. What wicked talk one hears, what gossiping. While I was gone, or so the neighbors claim, there was a certain strange young man who came to call upon you here and was received, but such a slander's not to be believed. And I would wager that their so-called news...
Heavens, don't wager. You'd be sure to lose.
What? Is it true, then, that a man...
Oh, yes. In fact, he all but lived at this address.
That frank reply would seem to demonstrate that she's still free of guile at any rate. But I gave orders, Agnès, as I recall, that you were to see no one at all.
I disobeyed you, but when I tell you why, you'll say that you'd have done the same as I.
Perhaps. Well, tell me how this thing occurred.
It's the most amazing story you ever heard. I was sewing out on the balcony in the breeze when I noticed someone strolling under the trees. It was a fine young man who caught my eye and made me a deep bow as he went by. I, not to be convicted of a lack of manners, very quickly nodded back. At once the young man bowed to me again. I bowed to him a second time, and then it wasn't very long until he made a third deep bow, which I, of course, repaid. He left, but kept returning, and as he passed, he'd bow, each time more gracefully than the last, while I, observing as he came and went, gave each new bow a fresh acknowledgement. Indeed, had night not fallen, I declare I think that I might still be sitting there and bowing back each time he bowed to me for fear he'd think me less polite than he.
Go on.
Then an old woman came next day and found me standing in the entryway. She said to me, "May heaven bless you, dear, and keep you beautiful for many a year. God, who bestowed on you such grace and charm, did not intend those gifts to do men harm. And you should know that there's a heart which bears a wound, which you've inflicted unawares."
Old witch, old tool of Satan, damn her hide.
"You say I've wounded somebody?" I cried. "Indeed you have," she said. "The victims whom yesterday you saw from the balcony." "But how could such a thing occur?" I said. "Can I have dropped some object on his head?" "No," she replied. "Your bright eyes dealt the blow. Their glances are the cause of all his woe." "Good heavens, madam," said I in great surprise. "Is there some dread contagion in my eyes?" "Ah, yes, my child," said she. "Your eyes dispense unwittingly a fatal influence. The poor young man has dwindled to a shade, and if you cruelly deny him aid, I greatly fear," the kind old woman went on, "that 2 days more will see him dead and gone." "Heavens," I answered, "that would be sad indeed. But what can I do for him? What help does he need? My child, she said, he only asks of you the privilege of a little interview. It is your eyes alone which now can save him and cure him of the malady they gave him. If that's the case, I said, I can't refuse. I'll gladly see him whenever he may choose.
Oh, kind old woman, oh, vicious sorceress, may hell reward you for your cleverness.
And so I saw him, which brought about his cure. You'll grant I did the proper thing, I'm sure. How could I have the conscience to deny the succor he required and to let him die? I am so pity anyone in pain and cannot bear to see a chicken slain.
It's clear that she has meant no wrong. And I must blame that foolish trip I took, whereby I left her unprotected from the lies that rascally seducers can devise. What if that young wretch, with one bold stroke, has compromised her? That would be no joke.
What's wrong? You seem a trifle irritated. Was there some harm in what I just related?
No, but go on. I want to hear it all. What happened when the young man came to call?
Oh, if you had seen how happy he was. How gay, and how his sickness vanished right away. And the jewel case he gave me, not to forget the coins he gave to Alain, to Georgette. You would have loved him also, and you too.
And when you were alone, what did he do?
He swore he loved me with a matchless passion, and said to me in the most charming fashion things which I found incomparably sweet, and never tire of hearing him repeat. So much do they delight my ear and start I know not what commotion in my heart.
Oh, strange interrogation, where each reply makes the interrogator wish to die. Besides these compliments, these sweet addresses, were there not also kisses and caresses?
Oh, yes. He took my hands and kissed them both as if he would never desist.
And did he not take something else as well?
Well, he...
Yes?
took...
What?
I dare not tell. I fear you'll be furious with me.
No.
Yes.
No.
Then promise not to be.
I promise.
He took my... Oh, you'll have a fit.
No!
Yes.
No, the devil out with it. What did he take from you?
He took...
God save me.
He took the pretty ribbon that you gave me. Indeed, he begged so that I couldn't resist.
Forget the ribbon. Tell me, once he'd kissed your hands, what else did he do, as you recall?
Does one do other things?
No, not at all. No. But didn't he ask some further medicine for the sad state of health that he was in?
Why, no. But had he asked, you may be sure I'd have done anything to speed his cure.
I've got off cheap this once. Thanks be to God. If I slip again, let all men call me clod. And yes, my dear, your innocence is vast. I shan't reproach you. What is past is past. But all that trifler wants to do, don't doubt it, is to deceive you and then boast about it.
Oh, no. He often assured me otherwise.
You don't know how that sort cheats and lies, but do grasp this. To accept a jewel case and to let some coxcomb praise your pretty face and be complacent when he takes a notion to kiss your hands and fill you with commotion is a great sin for which your soul could die.
A sin, you say? But please, sir, tell me why.
Why? Why? Because, as all authority states, it's just such deeds that heaven abominates.
Abominates? But why should heaven feel so? It's all so charming and so sweet, you know. I never knew about this sort of thing till now, or guessed what rapture it could bring.
Yes, all these promises of love undying, these sighs, these kisses are most gratifying, but they must be enjoyed in the proper way. One must be married first, that is to say.
And once you're married, there's no evil in it?
That's right.
Oh, let me marry them this minute.
If that's what you desire, I feel the same. It was to plan your marriage that I came.
What? Truly?
Yes.
Oh, how happy I shall be.
Yes. Wedded life will please you, I foresee.
You really intend that we two?
Yes, I do.
Oh, how I'll kiss you if that dream comes true.
And I'll return your kisses, everyone.
I'm never sure when people are making fun. Are you quite serious?
Yes, I'm serious, quite.
We're to be married?
Yes.
But when?
Tonight.
Tonight?
Tonight. It seems you're moved to laughter.
Yes.
Well, to see you happy is what I'm after.
Oh, sir, I owe you more than I can express. With him, my life will be pure happiness.
With whom?
With him.
With him? Well, think again. You're rather hasty in your choice of men. It's quite another husband I have in mind. And as for him, as you call him, be so kind, regardless of his pitiable disease, as never again to see him, if you please. And next he calls, girl, put him in his place by slamming the door directly in his face. Then if he knocks, go up and drop a brick from the second floor window. That should do the trick. Do you understand, Agnes? I shall be hidden nearby to see that you do as you are bidden.
Oh, dear, he's so good looking, so...
Be still.
I just won't have the heart.
Enough, you will. Now go upstairs.
How can you?
Do as I say. I'm master here. I've spoken. Go, obey. Anybody curious about anything?
Good for you. Thoroughly delightful. My question would be for either one of you. It seems to me that Molière has had a real resurgence in the last 3 or 4 years. It seems that everyone, campus theater, professional theaters, they're doing so much more Molière than previously. What do you think the reason is for that?
Well, I think Richard Wilbur should answer that, but I'll tell you the reason is because of Richard Wilbur. Because he has made these plays accessible to and relevant to audiences in 1988. Molière, of course, was a great genius, but he was very, very lucky, wherever he is floating around up there. He's very lucky for this man to have crossed his path, because unfortunately, equally great writers, dramatists, great in different ways, for instance, Chekhov and Ibsen, they have not found their Richard Wilbur. And so unfortunately we don't have access to these plays. But this man has made them accessible to us, and I think Richard should continue that. Do you have any feeling why Molière? Are you going to?
I love your reasons. I love your reasons, and I'm certainly not going to hasten to deny them. I think we also should give Molière credit for being timeless and generally human in ways in which many dramatists are not. The other person I've translated is Racine, and he's a very great dramatist. But it is harder, I think, to be faithful to him and at the same time bring him close to a contemporary audience. Why? Because there are qualities of belief and feeling in Racine that put him back in the 17th century amongst the stern Jansenists and those who believe that we have no free will. there's no such impediment in the attitude of Molière toward the world. I think we can understand instantly in each of his plays that there's some central character, like Arnulf or Tartuffe, who is behaving in a distorted and unbalanced way, in a way that Molière didn't consider natural, nor would we consider natural. It's very easy to understand what he thinks is wrong with his chief characters, and to understand the impact they have on a world which really isn't very strange to us. I think the world of 17th century France is quite intelligible to our 20th century American world.
Thank you.
The extraordinary thing also is that Richard said that he captured a way of behavior which he didn't consider natural, but in point of fact, it was the way he himself behaved, wasn't it?
Oh, you mean Molière himself?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
yes.
Because that's one of the extraordinary things, that like Arnulf, Molière in middle age fell desperately in love with a very, very young girl. And what always amazes me is that he can for instance, in The Misanthrope, which is patently him, and again, he's mad about Célimène, the young, delicious young creature, who drives him absolutely mad. And he's going insane with jealousy. And he experienced all these things. And what amazes me is that he can remove himself sufficiently to see the absurdity of his own behavior.
And then play the part.
And then play the part.
Yes.
But not only him playing the part, the girl he was mad about in real life was the girl playing the part that he was mad about in the play.
I would just like to ask Mr. Wilbur, just for a minute, if he would speak briefly about the differences of the French language and the English language as he's experienced it.
I think for the translator of French classic plays, there are lots of built-in difficulties. You cannot imitate the rhythm of a French line because the French language simply unrolls in a syllabic manner different from English, which is highly accentual. The basic French meter is a 12-syllable line, the Alexandrine. Our basic meter is the pentameter. And they really don't make the same kind of waves. But fidelity consists, I think, in unpacking the French Alexandrine and accommodating its materials thought by thought in the pentameter. There's a built-in infidelity here. You're taking a language which moves in gentle waves and putting it into a language which comes down hard on its stressed syllables. One thing that makes you worry about this while you're translating is that if you're rhyming as the original does, and as you should out of fidelity to Molière and the spirit of comedy, you're going to be coming down hard on your rhyme sounds at the ends of the lines in a way in which the French does not do. You're going to seem to be asking for laughs in a way in which the original, which is less emphatic, doesn't do. So you have to be aware of that and to try to keep every couplet from going bang and a begging applause. There are other things, no doubt, that I could think of. There are just basic differences between one language and another. But one simply alertly seeks out something parallel and avoids the folly of seeking to translate it directly, to produce something that is the same. You can never produce a translation that is identical to the original.
Is this why, conversely, the French have problems with translating Shakespeare?
I suppose that they do.
I'm told that the German translations of Shakespeare are absolutely superb because of the similarity between the two languages. But the difficulty of French people of capturing the iambic pentameter.
Mm-hmm. I think they probably don't try to capture our pentameter, but try to adapt it to their basic meters.
But the French versions of Shakespeare are not very successful, are they?
Well, I'm sure that it is very much easier for the Germans or the Russians to capture the movement, the very sinewy movement of Shakespeare's lines.
But one of Richard's achievements is that in rehearsal at times we have had a copy of the French text and of course had Richard's version because that's the one that we were performing. But when you go through it, you find that precisely the same thing is said in his version. Maybe in a, you know, it's like, but in that, within that line, it's exactly what's said, and I think that's one of his achievements.
I think the big thing you aim for in any translation is tone, to get the tone of it right. And secondly, I think one sets aside the idea of word-for-word fidelity, because that makes you write in a language which does not exist anywhere. But one insists upon a thought-for-thought fidelity. And it is possible, it simply is possible, given an open colloquial writer like Molière, to take him thought for thought out of his Alexandrines and put them into our 5-footers.
I once did I directed Tartuffe at the Kennedy Center, and CBS or NBC, one of these people, were putting some money into the production, and because they wanted an option to tape it, you know, for TV. And so they were calling the shots, and they would not allow Wilbur's version to be used because they thought that the TV viewers would be put off by the rhyming couplets. And so, as a result of this, I commissioned Simon Gray, who was a very, very, very talented playwright, and he did a prose version. He said, "Oh, I can't possibly do a verse version." He did a prose version, and as good as it was stale, flat, and unprofitable, because it didn't have the ebullience of somehow it needs these rhyming couplets, and it's like, you know, the couplets keep it like a ping pong ball on a spout of water. You know, it keeps it up there in a light and delicious way, and the prose does not do it justice. It's even good prose.
I think that if you translate Moliere's verse plays faithfully into prose, many of the speeches suddenly seem long-winded.
They do.
Whereas if you're doing it in 5-footers, even if you vary the treatment of the basic meter, what happens is that the phases of the argument get measured out to you at an assimilable rate.
And also it becomes heavy going, the play, you know, because it is rather a heavy play in a way, you know, a middle-aged man's obsession with who he considers as a guru, but is obviously a great phony, and the phony's bringing down the institution of the family and everything. It's a heavy play. And so it needs that balancing to retain its comedic quality. It needs the balance of this lovely language, you know, and the verse. Not only the verse, the rhymingness of the verse.
Yeah, I do think that's right. I think it's the dancing of the verse that makes absolutely certain that a play like Tartuffe won't collapse as it might in the wrong hands, into bourgeois melodrama.
Right.
You worry about whether Marianne's arm is going to be twisted or poor Orgon is going to lose his money in his house.
Yeah.
Who cares about all that? That's not the point.
Are there more modern plays written in verse that have achieved any kind of credibility? And if not, can you speculate why?
I recall that just a very few years before I first got the notion of translating Molière, there was a lot of somewhat localized excitement about poetry on the stage. Eliot's Cocktail Party appeared on the stage in New York with a very fine cast.
Thank you.
And
you don't mean that one, though, do you? You mean the other one?
What did I say?
Well,
I said the Cocktail Party.
Yeah. No, but I was wondering if you meant the production that was done at the APA or the original one with.
Well, I was speaking of the original, damn it, but you did the Guinness roll.
Well, I take back the thank you then.
No. Well, I was dating this around the late 40s, I guess. Isn't that when the Cocktail Party broke? And then there was The Lady's Not for Burning, which was a species of poetic play. At any rate, it had a lot of metaphors in it. And there were, around Cambridge, where I was at the time, there were an awful lot of people, most of them associated with something called the Poets' Theatre, who were writing in poetry for the stage, and were staging things like Yeats' poetic plays, his sort of no plays, McLeish's poetic plays. There was a good deal of vitality and hope going into it. I think that those high hopes have somewhat faded now, but I know there are some stubborn folk around who would like to revive them. Can you say something further about verse on the stage, Brian?
Well, of course, I spent, I suppose, most of my time doing verse on the stage. But Shakespeare, you know, I mean, the most modern I've come are the plays that he's mentioned, the Cocktail Party and the Eliot plays. I mean, I'm afraid I share Richard's. I think they have. Are you a writer of verse plays?
Not yet.
But you intend to be.
May not be.
Yeah. Well, I think you should pursue it because I mean, obviously. Actually, speaking of verse plays, did you see the Carol Churchill play that was in rhyming couplets, if you please, about the stock market in England? Yes. It was very clever. It sort of ran out of steam, but you know the one I mean?
No. Did it come over here to New York?
Yes, it came over here to New York and was done, and it was hugely successful off Broadway. Then they took it to Broadway and it failed miserably. But in England it was a huge success, and it was in rhyming couplets.
Yeah. Well, it certainly can be done.
Yeah.
And so. People should not give up hope.
No.
One more question.
We've seen a selection from one Molière play which I found before Mr. Wilbur's translation, I found very inaccessible to me because of its ending and its dependence upon an external source to sort of solve things. But the scene that we saw was wonderful, and I wonder if that isn't the beauty for an actor, to have a hypocrite abandon his role. It's the only time when he really voluntarily gives this. It's one time, I think, in the whole play when Tartuffe becomes human.
Well, listen, like a lot of us, his downfall is sex. Like a lot of us in high places.
actually, this is one of the reasons I said when we were talking about this program. I said to Mrs. Kennedy, because we didn't do Tartuffe at the Arena. I said we've got to do Tartuffe at this moment, in our lives, and of course, that's his Achilles heel. What Shakespeare in Merchant of Venice calls woolly breeding. I love that.
It's a very cheerful scene, I think, in which Tartuffe cannot resist nature. You say, long live nature. The coercion and exploitation of the world by such villains won't really work, because they'll all turn out to be hungry, lusty, or something else.
But what is so brilliant about that scene is if, like Damis, you were actually listening in a cupboard, it could be construed as an ecclesiastical conversation. Just because it's all so, it's all bliss, and it could all be heavenly. It's very, very clever.
Yes, the very first lines you say have got the Book of Common Prayer in them.
Yes, good. But with regard to the Deus Ex Machina, do you have any feelings about that? Do you think that was... You know, of course, that Tartuffe was banned for 14 years. And we don't know exactly, do we, what the original version actually consisted of.
I think it was a 3-acter originally.
I think it was 3 acts. But it's quite possible that, the Deus Ex Machina at the end, who is, Louis XIV, that could have just been put in just to sweeten things up a bit.
I sort of like, I'm sure it had to do with the difficulties the play had undergone, and with the fact that the king really was Molière's protector in this case, as in several other cases. But I like what the critic Jacques Guicharneau said about this, that however silly the ending may seem, however forced or opportunistic it may seem, we nevertheless at the end of the play are asked to contrast the domestic tyrant Orgon with the wise monarch Louis, with the idea of wise monarchy. And I do think that it makes a certain amount of sense. I think it's really in the words of the play at that point.
May I thank you for the wonderful afternoon you've given us.